Our closing hymn is number 261, Lord of the Dance. But before we sing it, I'll preach. In a sermon entitled The Great Dance, Frederick Buechner describes his trip to SeaWorld in Orlando, Florida. He begins by naming all the bait in that tourist trap. He comments on the large crowds and the canned music and all the Mickey Mouse t-shirts. But he quickly passes from the ridiculous to the sublime. He notes the company of his wife, his grown daughter. He notes the beauty of the day, the warmth of the sun, the crystal clear water in the tank, and the way the sunlight dances off the ripples. The beautiful human beings that are working the show, young men and women in fit bodies and in bathing suits, making the preparations. They walk onto the platform, a platform suspended over the tank, and the show begins. A gate is opened, 5 or 6 killer whales rush into the tank. The preacher finds it odd that we call them killer whales. No creature under heaven could look less killer-like as they raced around the tank. And then the preacher gets poetic. What with the dazzle of the sky and the sun, and the beauty of the young people on the platform, the soft southern air, the crowds all around us, watching the performance with a delight, matched only by what seemed to be the delight of the performing whales. It was as if the whole creation, men and women, beasts, and sun and water and earth and sky, and for all I know, even God himself, was caught up in one great jubilant dance of unimaginable beauty. And then right in the midst of it, he says, I was astonished. I was astonished to find that my eyes were filled with tears. The preacher looked over and noticed that his wife's eyes and his daughter's eyes were filled with tears as well. Well, 5 or 6 years later, Frederick Buechner tells this story to another preacher, and the preacher commented that he had seen the show at SeaWorld in Orlando, Florida, and pulled out an old manuscript of a sermon where he describes his own eyes filling up as well. They both agreed that what the tears they shed that day were tears of joy. They caught a glimpse of the peaceable kingdom envisioned by the ancient prophets. They shared in the very dance of creation. To see these whales breach the water and hurl themselves toward the sun is to see the deepest of joys. They were homesick. Homesick for the world that is supposed to be and is not. I think Jesus is homesick for the world that's supposed to be and is not. So Jesus dances. He dances a bit with the moral teaching of his time, and as he dances, he's preaching the waters of what is, longing for what should be. In this section of the Sermon on the Mount that Julie read for us today, Jesus pushes back against the acceptable standards of his own day, challenging us to strive for something higher. You have heard it said, but I say to you. It's a two-step dance. You've heard it said, but I say to you. It's an invitation for us to dance, for us to breach the waters of what is, and hurl ourselves toward what ought to be. I think they used oaths in the ancient world pretty much the same way we use oaths today. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? We have to put people under oath, you see, because it's okay to lie unless you're under oath. And we who live in the land of lies are frustrated and disappointed and angry. We who live in the land of lies are homesick for a deeper truth. Politicians lie to us all the time. Oh, it's the other party's fault. That's why things are so bad. In the epic battle for sound bites that leaves good governance in the dust. Advertisers lie to us all the time. Borrow money to get out of debt. Eat ice cream. Lose weight. Get drunk and gamble your resources away. After all, it's in support of education. And we ought to be particularly sensitive to this topic at this moment in our state's life. Once again, there is the effort to bring gambling to our area. And I think it's a horrible thing. That under the guise of enhanced revenue, we will create disaster and brokenness in the lives of many. Won't you dare to breach that water and hurl yourself toward what ought to be? You see, Jesus is down on people for taking oaths, asking his followers not to do that, because every word that we speak should always be the truth. There is no need to take an oath, because we are always truthful, all of the time. It's a new dance. It's a new way of living. And in this new dance, you see, we don't respond to violence with violence. Was it Gandhi or was it Martin Luther who said, an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind? Christianity changes the world by saying it's better to be killed than to kill. Nobody wants to dance with me now, I suspect. It's better to be killed than to kill. For the first 2 centuries of the Christian movement, there is no record of a Christian perpetrating violence against another. It's better to be killed than to kill. But Jesus isn't asking us to be doormats. He's not asking that we acquiesce to violence. Indeed, a close reading of verse 39 would tell us so much more. Did you notice Matthew's particular attention to the right cheek? The body mechanics are fairly simple. Most people are right-handed, and to strike someone on the right cheek requires a backhand slap. That's how a master was legally allowed to strike the slave. But if the slave turns the other cheek, you can't be struck with the back of the hand to your right cheek. To turn the other cheek is to adopt a defensive posture that does not acquiesce to violence, but at the same time does not participate in a violent confrontation. It is to say, if you're going to hit me, you're going to have to hit me as an equal. It was not legal for an owner to punch a slave, which is the only way a slave could be struck, in turning the other cheek. It's a new dance. It's a new dance. If they sue you for your cloak, it goes on to say, give them your coat as well. Walter Wick suggests we lose something in the translation, that coat and cloak are kind of English words. And according to the attire of the first century, the better rendering of the text would be, if they demand your outerwear, give them your underwear as well. And if the threat of public nudity doesn't stop the frivolous lawsuit, insisting that they take your dirty skivvies along with the deal, just might change the equation of the conversation. You see, it's not an acquiescence to accepted violence. It's a new dance that is neither violent nor passive in the face of violence. If you're forced to go 1 mile, it goes on to say, go the 2nd mile as well. A soldier under both Roman and Persian law was permitted to request someone to carry their armor, but only for 1 mile. If you offered to go the 2nd mile, the soldier would get in great trouble. So when you offer the 2nd mile, the soldier would probably invite someone else to carry his armor. You see, each of these examples are examples of responding to threat in a way that is neither violent nor passive. It's a new dance, a dance of life. You have heard it said, be violent in a violent world. But Jesus teaches us to hurl ourselves beyond violence towards something brighter than the sun. Athanasius was a great teacher in the Christian tradition, and he was from the Eastern Church in Alexandria about the 3rd century. And he illustrates our faith with this story. There was a gracious king who ruled the land with great respect for his people. And he blessed his people with freedom and did not lord his power over them. He was much loved by all, with the exception of one city in his kingdom. In that city, something went wrong. They rebelled against the king. They misused their freedom. They treated each other badly. The strong took things from the weak. Soon chaos erupted in the streets. It became a land of lies. mostly lies about the king. You see, the strong feared the king's righteousness, so they told lies about him. They said he did not care about the well-being of his people. And if he ever came to the city, he would come with armies to kill. Soon the fear of the king called forth the very worst in human behavior. Violence and hatred and murder and rape and slavery. And the king thought, what shall I do? If I take my army and conquer the city by force, the people will fight against me, and I will have to kill them. The rest will only submit through fear or intimidations, which will make them hate me and all that I stand for even more. How does that help them? To either be dead or imprisoned or secretly seething with rage against me. But if I leave them alone, they will destroy themselves. They will destroy each other. It breaks my heart to think of the pain they're causing and experiencing. So the king did something quite surprising. He took off his robes. He dressed in the rags of a homeless beggar. Incognito, he entered the city of rebellion. He began living in a vacant lot by a garbage dump. He took up a trade, fixing broken furniture and broken pottery. Whenever people came to him, his kindness and his goodness and his fairness and his respect were so striking that they would linger, just glad to be in his presence. They would tell them their fears, their questions. They'd ask his advice. So this wandering vagabond told them that they had been lied to, that they had been fooled, that the true king had a better way of life, which he exemplified, even as he taught. One by one, and two by two, and then by the hundreds. People began to have confidence and to live this way. Their influence spread to others, and the movement grew and grew until the whole city regretted its rebellion and wanted to return to the kingdom. But they were ashamed. They were ashamed of their horrible mistakes, and they were afraid to approach the king. But the king, in his disguise, told them the good news, that he himself was the king, and that he loved them. He held nothing against them, and he welcomed them back into the kingdom. Having accomplished, by a gentle, subtle presence, what never could have been accomplished through brute force. Jesus chooses to be killed rather than to kill. And as he dies on the cross, the rags of the disguise are stripped from him. And as he rises from the dead, we see the true nature, not just of God, but our own true nature, as well. Jesus chooses to be killed rather than to kill, and the rags of the beggar are stripped from him, and we see a resurrected glory. The cross itself is the very dance of life. It is more than a person deferring vengeance. It is the one who asks us to reject both violence and passivity, living by the very challenge uttered. The cross itself is the very dance of life. It is Jesus breaching the water of the way things are and hurling himself toward what ought to be. But it's not just his dance. It's our dance as well. It's a simple spiritual two-step. You've heard it said, but I say to you. Glorious dance steps, meant to bring the world that was supposed to be into existence. So dance. Reach the waters of what is and hurl yourself toward what is supposed to be. Do it for Christ and do it with Christ. And keep on doing it until you are caught up in that one great jubilant dance of unimaginable beauty, which is resurrected glory. So dance.